Too many windows. Here we go. Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm excited to see lots of old friends and new here today. My name is Lucy Gray, and I'm the co-founder of Actionable Innovations, which is a new PLC for educators who are interested in connecting and rethinking education, particularly in the era of coronavirus. I think we're all kind of seeking new channels and new avenues and are starting to think about what life is going to be in this new normal. And we invite anyone to drop in on Fridays and talk with us or get involved more deeply. And I can send you more information about that if you send me an email at lucy@lucygrayconsulting.com. So I'm really thrilled to see you all here today. This is what we do. We host conversations. We write about educational innovations on Medium. We support our friends here, and hopefully one day we're going to write a book and do consulting. But for right now, we're really kind of focused on the first three things. And we're also really interested in supporting the work of others, particularly around innovation. And Suzie Boss is joining us today, who's been a longtime educational innovator. And my friend Don will introduce her in a moment. You can find us. We have lots of different social media channels, and you can find the recordings from this net surfing up on YouTube. If you go to Linktree/actionable, you will find most of those links, and you can get to them from that link. So that's where you can find us. If you're interested in joining, again, email me at lucy@lucygrayconsulting, and I'll send you a one-pager that kind of gives you an overview of what we're trying to accomplish. And I'm going to now turn it over to Don, but Suzie is a wealth of information. She's written for Edutopia for a long time. She's written many, many, many books. And I'm particularly interested in hearing what she has to say today, because I just interviewed at a school that is developing a portrait of a learner. And so this could not be, for me personally, more timely. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Don and Suzie, and the rest of you, please feel free to mute so that we have less distractions in the background. So thanks for coming, Suzie. It's so great to see you, and take it away, Don and Suzie.
Great. Yeah. Do you mind unsharing your screen, Lucy?
That's right. It's a little daunting, that large photo of myself. Yes.
I
like the 1-inch size. Yeah, it's much better.
Awesome. So I am so excited to be interviewing Suzie today. I have a great story. I met Suzie in Mumbai, right, Suzie? I think 2015.
I think so. Yeah.
So we were co-facilitating with two other people, Saba Gobi, right, and Brett from the Mount Presbyterian School in Atlanta.
Right. Both a couple of innovators. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it was organized by Shabby, who was at the time the director of technology. And it was like a 3-day event for all of her faculty, and then some others as well from Southeast Asia. But it was we were there to be design thinking, which is what we are all experts in. But it was an interesting, we thought it through social entrepreneurship. So what Shabby did was she sourced local social entrepreneurs. They came in and pitched their problems to the audience. The audience decided which problem they wanted, in groups, which social entrepreneur they wanted to help solve their problem. And then we brought them through the empathy, define, ideate, prototype phases. And then they pitched back to the entrepreneurs. It was just an awesome idea, right, Suzie?
Really fun.
Yeah, it really was.
Fun. Yeah.
And one of the entrepreneurs we're still in touch with, and he runs a travel company and brings people to parts of Mumbai that you would not go to. Lucy, what's his name again?
Krishna. And
Krishna.
he was when I was in Mumbai at ASB in 2018, Jennifer Klein had Krishna take us on a 2-day tour of the city and countryside, and it was amazing. And we then had him present at the last global education conference that we did as well.
Fantastic. Yeah. His company's called Reality Tours, I think.
Reality Tours, yeah.
Right. It's fantastic. Yeah.
It is. And I was there when I was working with Suzie. Leah, my wife, was there, and she took one of Krishna's tours because I'd heard him that morning. And I'm like, you've got to go take one of these guys' tours. So that was great. But anyway, so that's my history with Suzie. And it was such a great time. And I have great memories of it. So that's why I'm so excited to talk to you today. So just to warm us up, my new fascination is the Proust questionnaire.
Oh boy,
that
I should have prepped.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to start with a few quick questions from it. So Suzie, what historical figure do you most identify with?
Oh boy. Gosh. I would think on the aspirational side, rather than identifying some, amazing journalist who, whether through Dorothea Lange's photography or Ida B. Wells' activism, or, somebody who used the power of writing and communication to really set change in motion. Not
awesome.
that I'm identify with in terms of emulating, but aspirationally, that's who I would love to find it. Love to have dinner with them sometime and pick their brains in my imaginary world.
Right. I'm a huge fan of Dorothy Lange. I mean, her work's incredible. I mean, it's absolutely amazing work. Great. What's your greatest extravagance, Suzie?
Greatest extravagance. My gosh, during COVID, it would seem like going out for dinner is going to be like a huge treat, someday. My greatest extravagance of, I don't know if it's an extravagance, but I've been playing a lot of tennis. So it's a use of my time, and making a commitment in my schedule can sometimes feel a little extravagant, but it's so much fun, and it's connecting me with people that I enjoy being around and makes me feel good. Lucy, I see yours as shoes. My husband might say that it's shoes in my case as well. But yeah, a couple of things.
Okay, and how about your greatest achievement? What would you say that is, Suzie?
My kids. I have two fantastic sons who are wonderful adults now, and the product of a long and happy marriage. So family, I guess, that's where my heart is. And then on the professional side, I just love writing, and so being able to bring stories to an audience and get them out in the world. I've been doing that since I was 15, I think. So
wow.
There you go.
Wow, great. Okay, last one. What's your greatest regret?
Oh gosh, greatest regret. Not fitting in one more trip before COVID shut me down. There was one, I was supposed to have been, one trip that I missed because of some, various situations. I didn't get to go to a trip that would have gotten me to the Galapagos, and I really wanted to get there.
Wow.
So maybe someday.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, great. So I'm recommending everyone try the Proust questionnaire. It's really an interesting series of questions. There's multiple ones. I've adopted one for educators. People have told me they use it with their students to get to know them, and stuff like that. Okay, so Suzie's book, here we are. It is.
Here goes over my shoulder too.
Yes,
Product placement.
redefining student success, building a new vision to transform leading, teaching, and learning. And it's great, Suzie. I love the layout. It's so easy to sift through it. It's my sort of book. I never start at the start. I just sort of ramble within. I go backwards, I go forwards. That's the way I learn, and it really facilitates that.
That's nice to hear. Yeah, it's fun to work with a good designer on a book, because if you have the kind of a mind meld of what you're trying to accomplish, and they can actually make it happen, is great. Yeah.
So it's awesome. So to start, can you tell us what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, I would say I'm going to credit my co-author, Ken Kay, for approaching me with this idea. Ken is somebody I've known, professionally. Our work has overlapped. If you don't know him, he's really one of the founders of the whole 21st century learning movement in I've heard him speak at conferences. My long activism in project-based learning and advocacy of project-based learning has overlapped with his work and his messaging. And a couple years ago, I asked him to write a foreword for me for a book around engaging stakeholders, because I've found that making sure you've got your stakeholders with you if you're trying to do anything in education is really critical. And so he wrote a great foreword for me, and we, became better professional friends. And then he was coming out of a long career and was getting ready to retire from his day job as the founder of Ed Leader 21. One of the co-founders of that organization. And, he approached me with this idea of working on a book together. And we come at education from different perspectives. And, I thought for a little bit about his background in really working with school leadership. I've spent more of my time working with teachers and being in classrooms. And at first I thought, well, I don't know, Ken, you're kind of a leadership guy. But then I thought about the challenges that teachers encounter when we're trying to get an initiative like project-based learning off the ground. And if you don't have everybody with you in that vision, or, if you just got a couple of teachers who are doing this as a one-off, it's just not going to go where it needs to go. You really need everybody with you. And I thought, all right, this could be kind of fun. And we started thinking about it and planning it before either of us had ever heard of COVID. So once COVID hit, all our research happened online. We interviewed something like 250 school leaders, students, parents, et cetera, business partners, all, I've spent my life on Zoom, I think. But that was kind of the story. And I think we continue to push each other's thinking, because we do have different backgrounds and different perspectives. So it was a really fun kind of collaboration where we're, have that opportunity to have that, different perspectives coming together to try to create something unique.
Right. So what would you say is the big idea behind the book?
Yeah, I think the title captures it pretty well. I think the big idea is that if we're going to move in some different directions in education, you can't do it piecemeal. You can't do it in a, we'll try to, pilot this over here and that over there. That really takes a vision, and the vision needs to have all voices contributing. So a collective vision where all your stakeholders, particularly those voices that have not been heard from in the past or have been dismissed or not invited to the conversations, including students, including parents who haven't maybe felt like they have the power to shape school policies. I felt like the whole community needs to really engage first in this shared vision, and then the school community, the school, at the school level, at the teacher level, you've kind of got your North Star to help you figure out, okay, here's where we've all agreed we want to go. It doesn't mean that you're trying to create students who will be clones of each other, or that there's one size fits all, but you've got a pretty grand vision of what you think students should know and be able to do, what kind of people by the time they graduate from your high school system, who are they as individuals who can contribute to your community? And how do you define that? What sorts of words do you bring to that vision in your community? And then from that, you can start doing some great backwards planning and think about, okay, how do we get there in a way that gives students a lot of opportunities to grow and stretch and try things and decide what they really want to pursue or not. So that's our big idea. It's very different from defining student success around SAT scores or around your literacy and numeracy. That may be part of the overall package, that academic accomplishment. We're not dismissive of that, but we felt like finding schools that were doing this work of resetting their vision in a way that really will set students up for the opportunities, for the challenges ahead. And then when COVID came along, it's like, boy, this work became so much more immediately necessary. I mean, I think our students have seen during this time adults struggling to be successful. If adults don't know how to collaborate or solve problems or think on their feet or be adaptive all the things that we keep saying, our students need to do, then, adults are going to fall flat. So I think the urgency of really thinking about how do we prepare students for whatever challenges and opportunities, it's not always to the negative, we're going to be right ahead of them. And how do we talk about that? And then how do we really think about building school systems that lead to that vision? So that's our kind of a wordy way of summarizing what we were about.
Right. So with the audience of your book being for educators mainly, Suzie, I was wondering, reading through it, would there be parts of it that I could just use with students, that students could take on?
Oh gosh, I would love that if we got this in the hands of students. We felt like we can talk a little bit more, but we also created some discussion guides for parents and students because we feel like they have got to be part of this conversation. This is their life, what we're talking about, their futures, and their current realities as well. So the book is just filled with what we call field trips. Really short little vignettes that are stories of students doing the kinds of things that we hope all students will get the opportunities to do around creative problem solving in different contexts. And I think you could use those case studies, those vignettes with students as sort of challenges, okay, here's what students were doing in Akron, Ohio. Here's what they're doing in Encinitas, California. What do you think about this? Is this the kind of learning experience you'd like? Or is there a similar problem or opportunity you want to pursue? So I think as a provocation, as a challenge, or as a just kind of light up their imaginations, those stories, they're short and they're, I hope, impactful. Really, and we talked with a lot of students, so the stories are full of student voices. They're not adults talking to kids about here's what you must do. We wanted to hear from students themselves.
Yeah. I mean, because the student part is, I've started to use this a lot teaching with high schoolers. I teach a high school design thinking, designability class, but I prototype lessons and I tell them I'm prototyping this. I've never done it before. Mm-hmm. So I'm telling them I'm navigating ambiguity. So, you're going to have to give me feedback. And then after we do whatever I'm doing, we go through the reflection. I wish, what if? And usually based on that, another lesson is generated from them, and then they take over. And it's really empowering for them, to be able to, that they're suggesting to me. But I feel showing your vulnerability is like the key to success with students. They can't do more for you once they're aware of that,
Oh, and just being so transparent about, we're figuring this out as we go along, and you guys are going to have to weigh in.
So you use the term, Suzie, which I love, greenlight culture. I never heard. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. And I have to say that term emerged from our conversations with all these folks that we talked about, and seemed like over and over again in different contexts, someone would say, we'd ask a question about, how did you get this, great project going, or how did you get it off the ground? And a teacher would say, well, I knew my principal would give me the green light, to take 200 sixth graders out to a lake and do water quality studies, along with our water department, because that's the kind of stuff she wants to see us doing. Or we talked to a superintendent about, how do you create a culture that's going to, invite teachers to think differently about how they're designing instruction if we want to get different results. And he would say something like, we've got to give a green light for innovation. And so we kept hearing it over and over again. And we thought, I think this is a term that has some real value. And so then we really started to explore it. We talked to some innovation experts. We kind of bandied that term about and got people to react to it, weigh in. And it seems to really resonate. What we want to get to, I think, is the point where students feel like they have the green light. If they have an idea for something that really motivates them or drives them or inspires them, problem they want to tackle, they need to feel like, here's something I want to be working on. And so for that to happen, everybody in the system has to feel like they've got that same, culture of, yes, let's do this. We have a system that allows for different ways of teaching and learning and demonstrating what you know. So we just, that's one of those phrases that just emerged from the conversations, and we just kind of recognized it in hindsight as we're going through our notes and saying, what did you hear? And, doing all these interviews, it came up enough times that we thought we were onto something there. So I appreciate that resonated with you too.
Yeah. And now I'm thinking, Suzie, I'm going to adopt that.
Excellent.
Traffic light. So green, amber, red. And I'm going to see how I can bring that into the classroom, because I love that analogy. It's really awesome.
And as one of the smart superintendents we talked to said, the other piece of this is you can't green light everything. This is where having that vision, having that North Star, whatever you want to call it, your portrait of a learner or a graduate, is so important, because you want to green light the things that are going to help you achieve that vision. And it helps avoid some of that, kitchen sink approach that we sometimes find when we're doing a little of this and a little of this and a little of this, and we don't know why we do any of it. It's not just that. It's kind of like with project-based learning. In a good project, you're still going to have some constraints around the design of the project. It's not just open season freewheeling. You're kind of going in a particular direction. So that's where that term came from, and I'm glad you like it.
Right. Yeah. So there's many things and I'm going to go through these. I've probably got about 4 or 5 questions, and then we'll open it up to the audience and me jabbering on. But the other one that resonated with me, because it's so active or proactive or is the ask yourself parts. Do you want to explain to the audience where did you get that idea and what it is, I guess?
Well, we hope that this book will inspire conversations within school systems. I mean, that's the goal. We would love for groups of leadership teams, teacher teams, to read this book together and talk about it. And so, especially as a longtime advocate of project-based learning, reflection is just a big part of it. Connecting what you're reading to your own experience. What does this make you think about? When have you been through something similar? What would you avoid doing? So we continued throughout the book with these places to kind of pause and encourage some reflection, journaling, note taking, whatever, conversation, whatever it might be. So we're hoping that it's a very used in a really active way. So that was the purpose of that. And so you'll see them sprinkled throughout it places where we really thought, we've been going through a number of stories now, a number of examples, and you can't just keep washing those over people without getting them to pause and think about, what's this causing you to think about?
Yeah, no, I mean, and I feel like there's elements of the design thinking process sprinkled out, because the ask yourself, you pause, but then there's a bias towards action because you're asking us to do something.
Right, exactly.
Which is really awesome.
Yeah. We don't want people just, noodling around in their heads. We're hoping to see changes happening, in what students learn and do and how they demonstrate all of that.
Yeah, no. So I could see, I guess it's my design bias as well, of course.
I share that with you. So
totally. So the other bit I love in it is the field trips. Do you want to explain that to our audience?
I mentioned those briefly before when you were talking about sharing these with students, but one of the big themes of the book is that if there's a kind of an overarching goal that we see school systems adopting as kind of their North Star, we think that you could summarize it or describe it really well as creative problem solving. Because if students are creative problem solvers, they are also, they're communicators, they're critical thinkers, they're having to be creative. A lot of the things that school systems might talk about in different ways are kind of included under that umbrella of creative problem solving. And we didn't want it to be just theoretical or aspirational. We wanted to paint a picture of what does it mean for students to be creative problem solvers. So we focused in on 3 particular contexts that we thought were really interesting, that were coming up in our conversations. One was around sustainability. because we know anybody who's talking to young people today, if you're not hearing them talk about our planet and climate and where are we going, are we going to survive all this? You're not listening very well, because we know that's really top of mind for a lot of our students. So one chapter takes a look at the sorts of problem solving students are doing around sustainability. And we've got everything from elementary kids, through high school, really taking on sustainability challenges for their schools, for their families, for their communities in many cases. There's a wonderful, and so these field trips are our opportunities to show, what does this look like in action today? Not what do you hope to do someday, but what are schools doing right now that we hope will inspire you, will get your teachers and your community motivated. So sustainability is one. Another chapter focuses on entrepreneurship and innovation, coming up with new products, new solutions, being able to pitch ideas, things like that, invention. And the third one, I think, is just more important than we ever imagined when we were doing the research. And it's around civic engagement and students as active, engaged citizens. And I think the politics of the moment are showing us the urgent need for every student to develop the skill set of being able to, think about the issues of the day. How do I engage as a member of my community? What does that mean? And it doesn't always mean that your students are landing right in the middle of, hot button issues. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it means your students notice that they need to get to school in a safer way. We had students taking a look at their communities and doing some really great mapping using some geoliteracy tools and creating maps of, where do students cross and why do they have to walk across train tracks and what could we do differently? And they advocated for, kind of safer routes to school. So very much an engaged citizenship project that involved great critical thinking. So it doesn't mean we're advocating for a particular political bias or, that your students have to be, lining up with, on one side or another of the political aisle that is just so active and noisy right now, but developing that skill set of being able to understand my community, understand different perspectives, understand my role in it, whether it's your immediate community or the wider world. And Lucy, I know given your global education interests and Don, yours as well, we could talk more about some of those examples, but it's the same set of skills, whether you're focusing on what's right close to home or thinking about perspectives in a much broader context. So in each of those three big buckets, those chapters, we include lots and lots of field trips because we want to show, what does it look like? What are we talking about? What could you do if you're excited to see these kinds of stories happening?
Yeah. No, I love those field trips because it's resonating a design ability from abstract to concrete. Yeah. So you're talking about stuff and then you're given the concrete example, Right. So again, I'm seeing all the design right through it. Great. It's great.
I love it.
So this is my last question. So my favorite chapter was chapter 3. The one is be the leader of creative problem solvers, of course, my bias. Do you have a favorite chapter?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. I worked hard on that active citizenship chapter. And I think some of the examples in that, what is that, chapter 5 maybe?
5, yeah.
Yeah, be the leader of engaged citizens. And
chapter 4, sorry.
Chapter 4, okay. But I think my favorite part of the book is that middle part with all the field trips. If I have to point to a particular favorite part, we also early in the book talk about getting your vision and your culture right and kind of there's some strategies to do that. Then we go into these field trips. Then we look at the third part is around implications for practice. So everything from professional development to rethinking assessment to, navigating change, we get into that. But that middle part of the book, the field trips you're talking about, that's really my favorite part of the book.
Okay, great. So the Irishman will shut up. I promise I will. I just want to lastly say, Suzie, this is really awesome. It is so dense. There is so much in it. I was, I'm thinking I'm going to write a book, and I was looking at it like, oh my God, there is so much in it, and
Well,
so
this
much
is
for
the
everyone.
beauty of collaboration, right? You get two
Yeah.
people chiming in. Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally amazing. And what I say is I love this fact that you can pick up and just pull chapters, you know, for
Oh, good.
the ADD of us. And that's great. But thanks for coming on,
Oh, it's
Suzie.
just delightful. I'm so honored to be part of this conversation. And frankly, I'm delighted that you and Lucy have gotten this group started, because I think we're all missing those connections, you know, and kind of fuels the soul. So thanks for getting this going. Yeah.
Okay, cheers, Suzie. Okay, Lucy, let's open it up. The Irishman will be quiet. I won't normally
Okay.
My grandmother's maiden name was Moriarty, so you know I've got a bit of a storyteller in me as well. So,
So I'm going to start out with a question, and my question is, I just was interviewing at a school, a 2-day extravaganza where I was questioned by everyone, and at this particular school, standards-based grading is something that they're interested in exploring and doing more with that. And I'm wondering, is that, you know, you've mentioned the mastery transcript in your book and that sort of thing. Can you elaborate on the role of standards-based grading and maybe talk a little bit more about the mastery transcript for people who don't know about it? And do you see the head of the school sees that grades are going to be going away? He thinks that the whether it's, you know, 5 years or 10 years or whatever, that's the way of the world, and it's related to equity as well. And he sees it going away because we're lessening emphasis on, you know, the SATs at the collegiate level and that sort of thing. So, any thoughts about that kind of work and what schools should be doing to prepare for? It's a really radical change, and if it's not done well, it sounds to me it can be a little bit chaotic to people who are used to traditional school. So I would love to hear your thoughts about that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I would say is both of those trends that you're describing, I think, really shift the focus to thinking about students' growth over time. Rather than, you know, what's your score compared to all the other kids in the class, or what's the average of all the work you've done this semester to come up with one score at the end. Where are you beginning? How are you making progress? And how do we know you're making progress? What's the evidence of your growth over time? And I think that is a really different metric than what parents are used to, you know, what they think report cards are for, what report cards should look like, and those sorts of things. And so you get more of a narrative and more evidence of learning gathered, for example, in a portfolio, instead of, you know, everything being numerical and test scoring. When it comes to standards-based grading, I think the goal there is for that conversation about which standards are we aligned to. You know, what is it that's what's worth knowing? What are kind of the big ideas of our content, and how do we help students dive deeply into that content and demonstrate what they know? So, you know, whether grades are going to go away again in the future, in the near future, in the distant future, I don't know. You know, I wish I had a crystal ball to find out, but I know that some of the more innovative schools we've talked to are already changing their reporting systems and having pretty big conversations with their parents about why does this look different, and why does this give you a better view of your students, where they are today and where they're trying to get to, and the student's own voice in the assessment process. You know, things around these pieces really fit together nicely. If students are part of the assessment process, they're choosing which pieces of evidence reflect their competency, you know, against different learning goals, different standards, mastery of the goals they're trying to get to. They can talk about that in a conference if they're part of the conference with parents and teachers. They can add that to a portfolio and reflect on it to give this really well-rounded view of who they are and what they know and what they can do. And just briefly, Lucy, because you asked about the mastery transcript, you know, that's one of those potentially game-changing opportunities in education. And we actually interviewed she was one of the first students to graduate from high school and apply to college using a mastery transcript. So she was in the first class of students who had used that as a way to demonstrate, kind of tell a college, here's who I am, with a portfolio of work, well-rounded, that goes beyond kind of traditional metrics. And she was just such an exceptional kid. I think she applied to 9 schools and got into all of them. But what I loved in talking with her was just about how reflective she was about herself as a learner. She had just arrived at college, COVID had just happened, and she was immediately able to think about, how am I going to adapt? Who do I need to support me? How am I going to help other people make progress through this strange time? How are we going to form study groups and use digital tools to keep our learning going? I just thought, boy, this is a kid, this young woman who really knows how to learn, and she knows herself as a learner. She knows her strengths. I think those are the outcomes that you want to see with these new kinds of assessments. It's really, I'm kind of jumping all around there, but I think it's exciting opportunities to rethink, how are we talking about assessment, and then how do we make sure both our students and our parent community understands and is part of this change, so you don't get those sorts of pushback moments that can happen. We do describe some examples in the book of districts that were challenged by parents who just kind of came, to meetings up in arms and said, what do you mean you're throwing out grades? Our kids are juniors, too late, So how do you navigate change in a way that makes sense over time to parents? How do you move in these new directions? So, I think go ahead, Lisa.
What was interesting in the conversations I had with high school students at the school was that they were thrown by it. The departments that had been dabbling with this earlier and had really kind of dug in seemed to have the kids have responded to it better. And when they, I think they were looking for more, they understood basically the concept of it, but they wanted to know more. They wanted more transparency about it and what the plan was and why. And they're still very stuck on the ABCDE model.
Yeah.
And to let go of that when your future's fate is, right in your face going to college, I think it's a little hard. But it was so interesting to hear them. But at this particular school, this had been a grassroots movement from the teachers, which I think you want to capitalize on that. When teachers want to make a shift like this, I think it's really important to kind of, take that and run with it. And so I think also COVID also kind of played a role in how things were going. And so, kind of a reframing of it, I think will be important for them. Mike, my next question for you, do you know any school districts that are doing this really well and are pretty far along in this work that you would recommend people to look at in particular based on your research?
On the competency and standards-based and mastery transcript model? There were a couple that really stood out. Let's see if I can remember off the top of my head. Sanborn, I think, Regional High School is in New Hampshire. Brian Stack is the principal there, and he's written a book about competency-based learning. New Hampshire as a state has really embraced this. So you don't have a school system that's butting up against state expectations for assessment. They're really aligned. That's important. We heard remarkable stories from a little district in the Central Valley of California, Lindsay Unified School District. This is a district with virtually 100% poverty, very high percentage of families that speak Spanish at home. It's a district that is very open about why they needed to change their entire vision for learning, because they were consistently at the bottom of the barrel. They were, countywide, by all the traditional metrics. They felt like, we just continue to fail families and, students and families. And so they had really big community conversations. They provided food, they provided childcare, everything, and had translators. And so it was in English and Spanish. And they just asked families, what is it you want? What do you want for your students? And the parents were just consistent about saying, we want their lives to be better. We want their lives to be better than ours. So create a school system that sets them up for whatever they want to do in the future, so that there aren't going to be any barriers or limitations on their opportunities. And that was the starting point for them to design what has become one of the leading competency-based systems in the entire country. No student graduates from their school system unless they show, at least competency of the particular learning goals that they're aiming for. And they hope that most of them, so basically, if you were compared to ABCD, you got to have a B or better, based if you were trying to compare apples and oranges, but you've got to be at least good, if not excellent. And you get multiple attempts. It's not like, you failed this class, so too bad for you. You continue, you set goals, you get support, you continue working. You're on individual pathways, but with a lot of guidance. And I'll tell you just one more quick thing I would add. That system, of course, as with everywhere else, they've struggled with COVID. But because they had done this work in the previous years leading up to COVID, they were in such a better place to move forward with more personalized, individualized learning, where students felt like they had more control, different ways to demonstrate what they knew. Parents understood the system, how everything worked. So that was to me, just a remarkable story. And I know they've received attention over the years because of the great work that they've done. But it started by recognizing, we are failing our kids, and we're tired of that. And I think they had brave enough school leaders and teachers who just said, we've got to do something different. And they've really now become leaders of, instead of trying to become the best in the world at very traditional, grading sorts of assessments, they said, we're going to be best at, meeting the needs of our kids. And they really become leaders in the whole competency movement. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that sounds, I can't wait to dig into that information in your book about the districts and states that you mentioned. The other piece of this too is, what's the incentive for high achieving schools to move in that direction? I think that's probably another thing that we could talk about. And then the other thing I would want to say is, what happens if kids are in schools where they're being taught this way and supported and fostered this way? What happens when they go to college and they go back to the ABCDE model? Are there any universities or colleges that are moving in this direction as well? I'd be really curious if any popped up in your research.
I have to say, I'm not that familiar with the higher ed, the shifts underway there, but I will say that I think when students are coming out of school systems that have shifted to this more mastery-based approach, and they're having these sort of wraparound transcripts that show the 360 view of a student, they're looking for universities where they're going to be able to continue on that path. I talked with the principal of a public high school in Washington State that, again, has pioneered using the mastery transcript in public education. It actually got started in very high achieving, independent schools. It's kind of the roots of the mastery transcript, but public systems are starting to take it up because they're recognizing the benefits for students as well. And that principal, they're just having to have conversations with the college admissions folks and letting them know we're starting to shift how we talk about student success and what it looks like and how students demonstrate what they know and can do. Are you ready for our students to apply? Do you have an application process that lets them kind of tell their story? And I think as we hear colleges increasingly get dismissive of things like SAT scores, and we're not necessarily looking at that, what are they going to look at instead? And I think these new sorts of portfolios of student work and more holistic pictures of students and who they are as learners and how they've taken advantage of different learning experiences, they're going to be able to really tell their stories of kind of, here's who I am, here's where I want to go, because I'm somebody who's used to setting goals instead of passively waiting for them to be set for me. And I'm not saying that we're at the moment where all colleges have shifted to this model, but I think we're going in that direction. And
it's exciting.
yeah.
Bob Hudson has a question in the chat. Bob, do you want to ask it, or do you want me to read it out loud?
And Lee also had a question, Lucy.
Great.
Either way, actually, it's we hear the narrative that's in mainstream media, it's in educational journals about learning loss and how these 2 years have been so devastating. But we've seen, and I know many people that have had an investment in creating conditions for all students to develop over time, have seen these learning leaps. They've seen second grade students who are setting their own calendars, making appointments, transitioning from always being told where to go and what to do and what to think, to being a little more independent with the support of not only teachers, but their families as partners. And we can't dismiss the fact that it's been very challenging for all partners in the educational front, but for administrators and leaders to create those green light cultures, permission to innovate is what we like to call it. They have to walk that fine line between the mandates that are put upon them, and yet developing that trust and the relationships that allow teachers to do things that are a little different. And of course, there's resources and other things with it, but how do we keep that at the forefront, knowing that, yes, reading and writing and calculations are still very important, but in the context of knowing the why and how we see the Great Resignation around the world, and developing in students the opportunity that entrepreneurialism isn't just a novel concept if you go to D school or other places, but it's really about reinventing ourselves and using the skills and knowledge we have, and then acquiring new skills and knowledge as needed to accomplish whatever challenges come our way.
Oh, thanks for that comment. I'm just going to jump on the phrase you used at the beginning about learning leaps. And I think it reminds me that educators, in particular education leaders, need to remember to be good storytellers. And when you see examples of students who, as you said, the second grader who now knows how to set appointments and get the help he or she needs, and raise questions and make things happen, you need to capture those moments. You need to document them. I'm thinking of Lucy, our friend Sylvia, and her wonderful advice about documenting learning and being a storyteller of student learning, helping students to tell their own stories, but also capturing this different kinds of evidence of what students are accomplishing. There's a great piece in ASCD just today about a school system in, I think it's an independent school in Northern California, that has been surveying its students about what did you experience during COVID, what engaged you in learning, what helped you succeed. And boy, if every school would be doing that, we'd have some great evidence to help us plan what are the next steps going to be. Talk about going back to your prime users down another design thinking strategy. You've got to interview your primary users. And, our students know better than anybody what's been working for them, what's been a hindrance, what's been boring. There's some great insights, in that piece about students can really articulate the things that matter to them. It's not surprising to anybody who's been thinking about, student engagement over time, but, they want relevance. They want connections to their lives. They want their voice to be heard. They want to be able to shape their path, all the things you're talking about. So I think paying attention to some of those successes that have happened, despite all the challenges, and it's a way to change the focus away from, oh my gosh, we're so far behind, we've got to go back, we've got to catch up, we've got to go, really traditional and just hammer home, everything kids have missed. No, you want to recognize they've been through this, horrendous experience, but they probably have tapped some strengths they didn't even know they had. So let's see if we can leverage those. This is the eternal optimist in me speaking. but I appreciate your comment, and I think just recognizing the power of those kinds of stories about learning leaps, changes the whole tone of conversation about education right now.
Well, thank you for the field trips, and hopefully that'll continue to grow and build as your online version will collect even more stories of these kinds of successes.
Yeah, I hope so.
I think Lee had a question. Lee, go for it.
Sure, I've got a whole bunch listening to. I want to point out that my colleagues and I actually did research on the effects of COVID, the COVID shutdown.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if you're all familiar with the communities of inquiry. And the idea of communities of inquiry is that you have three different aspects. You've got the teaching presence, the content presence, and you have the social presence. And one of the most important things that we found was it was the social, and when we talk about the social presence, that's when we're talking about how students interact with the teacher, how students interact with the student. The content presence obviously is, how is it being taught, and am I really learning as I go through this? And the teacher presence is all about the kind of guidance that they do when they set the stage. And one of the things I have found most important is the SEL in the process, the social and emotional learning.
Yeah.
Because if the teacher doesn't connect with the student, learning is not going to happen.
Yeah.
And what I did is at the end of my first semester, I haven't looked at my data for this semester, but at the end of the first semester, I would start every class at the very beginning, asking each and every one of my 35 students, if you could have a superpower, what would it be? An icebreaker question. And of course, I'd have to start at 10 minutes to the hour, so I didn't infringe into our time. But this is a way in which I got to learn about them. They got to learn about me. And at the end, I asked them, I had a survey, and first thing I asked them was, did you appreciate this? And 87% of them said yes.
And how often do kids get asked that question? Did you appreciate this instructional move that I made today? That's what, as Dawn was saying, give me some feedback, and
that's
exactly
exactly it. And interestingly enough, 87% of them said that they thought that it brought me closer to them. And 75% of them said that it made the class more important, so they tried harder. Is there anything more that a teacher would want to hear?
Exactly. Yeah. Now, and I hope that in addition to doing that great research, that you were telling your story too, that, I think other schools need to learn from what you're describing and how that has shaped things. And boy, I can't emphasize enough the importance of as you said, the social and emotional side of learning. Boy, has that ever been elevated in importance through COVID.
I know we started an SEL minor in our program, and I just think it's something that good teachers always knew.
Right.
Fortunately, it's been beaten out of us with No Child Left Behind and all those other things where they're trying to see if we're doing it right.
Yeah. It's not in the pacing guide at SEL. It's in the pacing guide. Yeah, but it's just we know it's foundational, and so thanks for sharing that. That's really important.
Well, I'm done with questions there.
That's great.
So Doris has a story that she wants to relate, and I have to laugh because Doris is a former student of mine.
Oh, great!
She was in a class I taught a long time ago.
That's closing the circle here. That's great.
Yeah. I haven't seen her in a long time, and she's also a design thinker, designer by trade. Don, you need to know Doris. So take it away, Doris.
All right, thank you. And actually, I've met Don, and I visited him there in New York.
Yes,
because of you. Thank you, Lucy. I just wanted to share a quick story of this. Happened it was around 2014. I was mentoring a graduate design student from Emily Carr up in Canada. And she was a designer in residence rather than an artist in residence, because this particular therapeutic school, they were having trouble bringing creative expression into their classrooms. And I'm not sure why, but I just know that they had issues. But they ended up engaging this graduate student, and she found her way to me somehow. I don't know how, but anyway, long story short, we ended up creating curriculum that was, it was project-based, but it was more focused on developing the kids' capacity to become creative problem solvers. And these were kids in the equivalent of like 3rd grade, give or take. And they looked at their kind of their constellation based on the psych evals and whatever science was written about each of the students, and they actually tiered them, right? So there were kind of kids that were at a normal learning pace, and others that were less than that, and perhaps more, I don't know. Anyway, long story short, again, that with the projects that we had the kids experience, the lower kids ended up outperforming the kids that were more atypical or typical. So the atypical, and the director of the school didn't believe the data because we treated it as an action research project.
Mhm.
And she even brought somebody in from the university to check the numbers. And they were validated and more because this person left teaching. She went back to school to learn more about it.
Wow.
So it is just, this is powerful stuff. Just
Absolutely.
allowing students the privilege and the right to understand a problem set, understand, the essential question and the learning targets and how they're going to be assessed, and giving them a voice where feedback loops are part of the learning process, not something that is to be looked at as a grade, so formative. It's just powerful stuff. And there are other stories that I could share with things that I did in Boston and others, but it's just to see the transformation come out of not only the students of feeling empowered, but the people that are teaching them and the administrators.
Right. Thanks for sharing that story. I mean, it's profound. And then the idea that, oh, this couldn't possibly be true reaction. It's really interesting that you had to actually bring in someone to vet the results.
And the fact that she just blew up her job and left. It's like, okay.
Wow. So I was just going to add, I'm going to put something in the chat here in a minute, but before we leave, I want to be sure that we share with you, Ken and I created discussion guides, as I mentioned, for both parents and students, to bring them into this conversation about, is school changing? How does it need to change? And they were developed with focus groups of students and parents. They're in English and Spanish, and they're free to download. So I'll put the link to get those in the chat, but we can talk more about those if anybody's interested. But I just didn't want to leave without sharing those with you.
So it's 2:00, and I know people need to move on to their next exciting Zoom meeting. But if you want to hang out, and if Suzie wants to hang out a little bit longer, we can continue the conversation. And I'd love it if everybody put into the chat if they want to stay connected, because this is all about building a professional learning community. If you put your Twitter URL in chat so people can follow you, everyone. And if you're interested in connecting further, maybe put your LinkedIn profile as well, the link in, and that way we can all connect with each other. And before everybody runs off, next week we're going to have Jessica, who is in the audience, be interviewed by Don next week too. So Jessica, do you want to say hello or anything? She may not be still here, I'm not sure. But she's going to be fun and exciting next week. So she was here earlier, so she might be here, you're right. But she might be multitasking. So, and then we have a couple other ones that are planned. Steve Douglas from Lake Forest High School, which is my alma mater, and Doris used to live in Lake Forest, and I think her kids went to Lake Forest High School, is going to be talking about his Chicago Summer Stories on February 18th. This is a program that's a multimedia summer kind of camp experience, and he's done it in different iterations. And the most recent one was last summer with Lake Forest High School alum Vince Vaughn, and his daughter participated in it. And it's really fun. It's really interesting how the kids took on their roles in this. And I know you all will really, really like Steve. He also did something similar in St. Louis, where he's from, in partnership with the Cardinals. And I happened to be in St. Louis when it was going on and stopped by to meet those students with a friend of mine. So we have a lot of things coming up, and we also have a couple other ones that we have not booked because we're trying to deal with logistics of things. And we're going to be starting to do these conversations on Wednesday evenings as well. So that's what we're doing. I will put the link to our website and that sort of thing in the chat if you want more information, or you can email me at Lucy@Lucy Consulting. I can send you more information about getting further involved with our group, which includes, we have a Slack group behind the scenes and that sort of thing. So if you have to go, go. If you want to hang out and ask more questions and chit chat, we're here. Anybody else have anything to say? Don, do you want to say anything to wrap up?
Before you sign off, there's a treasure trove of information in our chat room. You all know, and I want to make sure you know how to save that chat. You go to, you've got your chat column there, and down the lower right hand corner, you'll see 3 little dots. And so when you click on that, it'll say save chat. And what'll happen is that on the left hand side, it'll say chat saved, and on the right hand side, it will say show in Finder. If you want to find it, you have a folder that Zoom made on your computer, and it will be saved in there. So that way you can keep all that information. Because I hate it when I finish something like that and they've already signed it off and I can't get it.
Great. Thanks for the reminder. It's so important.
I usually send it in the show notes too. So if it's okay, if you can't find them, let me know and I can send them to you. So Suzie, did you put into the chat the discussion guides too?
I did.
Okay,
It's our,
awesome. Okay.
yeah, they're there, and they're freebies, and we would love people to use them and to let us know, what sort of conversations do they spark and do they resonate with your community?
Perfect. Anybody else have a comment, story, question they want to ask?
I have one thing real quick, and that is that that opening question activity is something I'm doing in my class. I've been researching it for a year. I'm looking for other professors who would like to do that in their class and be part of this. I need to get 10 professors, and it'd probably be the last, we would start in another week. And the idea would be at the beginning of each class, you would ask them. And what I have at the end is I actually have, and this is online, and at the end, I actually have 2 parts. The first part has to do with the opening question activity. The second part has to do, why are you turning off your cameras? And I interestingly enough, I found that the reason that they were doing it is because they were self-conscious. 50% of them said that. Now, and only 10% admitted because they were doing something else. But it was pretty interesting to see what's there. I put a link in there that takes you to that information as well. So would anybody here like to, if you're interested, send me a note. It's Zeitz, ZEITZ @uni.edu or @Zeitz. And I'd love to have you help me.
That's great.
There you go.
So Suzie, what's next with this book? What are your plans, you and Ken? What are you planning to do with this? Are you going to be at conferences? Or are you going to be talking other places? Anything that we should know about?
Yeah, we do have kind of a busy spring calendar. We're hoping the COVID allows us to enjoy it. Ken will be at AASA, that superintendent's conference in next month. With 2 superintendents are going to join him. 2 who were featured in the book are going to join him for a session there. I'm going to be in Texas next month at something called the Texas STEM Conference, talking with educators there. Let's see what else. In the end of March, we're going to be at High Tech High for the Deeper Learning Conference. Excited about that.
Yeah, I'd love to go to that. That's
I've never been to it. I'm very excited about that. Yeah. And then right after that, the same trip, it's in San Diego. The National School Boards Association meets, and we're doing a 3-hour pre-conference institute for school boards and superintendents to talk together about all of this stuff. And then we're doing a breakout session with a school board head and superintendent from Val Verde School District. So we've got a bunch of things, and then more over the summer. So yes, busy time. We're hoping that it's interesting how when's the right time for a book like this to launch? Is it in the middle of a pandemic? Is, no, probably not. A lot of districts are not feeling like this is the right time for them to be visionaries. And yet, a number of the ones, including the superintendent in Val Verde, Mike McCormick, was just on a call with us yesterday. And he said, if we hadn't been doing this visioning stuff, this portrait of a graduate, we would not be in such a good place in response to COVID. We know how to respond to our students. We've got the technology in place because we did that work as part of our visioning. And we've got 60 wraparound tutoring for kids because we realized we needed to do that if we wanted them to be successful pre-COVID. So during COVID, that's helping. So we'll see if it how many districts are game to kind of take on the challenge. But we feel like, why not a time when you're already, challenged and maxed out with stress? Oh, great time to think about a vision. But it actually kind of is.
I think the school that I interviewed at yesterday is about to finish their portrait of a learner, and so and they look at that as kind of the cornerstone of all their work. And I think schools are exhausted. I think people are exhausted right now, but they know at some point they're going to have to deal with the moving forward. Like everything that's kind of come to a standstill is going to kind of start moving again, and they've got to be ready with it. I think the other piece too is I think schools need to take an assessment of where they're at, what lessons learned, what needs to, and also kind of looking at culling rather than adding.
So important.
What
can we get rid of?
And also, like, how can we refine our processes? Like, do we need to do meetings the way that we've always done them? What information can be delivered in another method that would be much more efficient to people? How can we be cognizant of people's time? I think that's where schools really need to do. And we've been talking about in this group about writing a book. So I'm going to ask you a kind of a selfish question here. What is your advice to aspiring education writers, particularly maybe in a group or a paired setting? Our goal has been to kind of just get stuff on paper and see where it goes, I guess. And so on digital paper. So we're each writing individual things and then publishing it to this medium publication. And it's fun because we have this kind of conglomeration of stuff. More people have been active than others. But anyway, I think we were hoping to write a guide to innovation, or, I have kind of this roadmap in my head of what schools need to do to go through a process, but it may be kind of redundant in comparison to the kind of work you've done and like Scott McLeod's done and that sort of thing. So anyway, what's your advice to people who want to, put their ideas on paper and publish, and maybe even self-publish? Any thoughts on that?
Oh gosh. I often brainstorm with colleagues who are working on their first book or, pitching a book. And I think just reaching out for help is really important. So if you're at a point where you want feedback, I'm always happy to provide that or point you toward potential, publishers I've worked with that might be open. But I think, especially in a collaboration, kind of syncing up your ideas, like, are they, you don't want to repeat each other. Where's the value add or the tension? So some of that I think is, and Ken and I had to work through some of that in this collaboration as well. And I've collaborated on other books in different ways with different authors as well. And I think just figuring out how are we going to work together? How are we going to kind of blend our voices? Is it going to be, a Lucy chapter and then a Dawn chapter, or is it, something that's both and? So some of those questions about, what's the story we've got to tell here, and then how do we want to go about telling it? And I think the so what. So if people read this book, what do we want to happen? And I think that helps you with your own kind of North Star. Why does the world need another education book? Well, because, you probably have a really good because, and I think
we're working on it, but we'll see. But I think the cadence of your book, and I like the actionable steps. And I think that's something that those kinds of elements are things that we want to build into it. So like, write a chapter and then have some to-dos, hence the word actionable in our group that Amy came up with. Yeah, so I mean, it's just, I think I think you are so experienced with writing too that I think once you get through like your first book or two, I would think that you understand the process and it becomes a lot easier. And I think for us, it's like getting, birthing that first book. It might be a little messier and trickier than we anticipate. Absolutely. But I have to say, I'm like really proud of Don, because Don is like a writing machine now. Awesome. Because of this. And Don, do you want to talk about what you've been writing about a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, what I found is I've been writing about my experience with students. Mm-hmm. So I'm just packaging that because it's been so enriching. I mean, when I started, I did a few generic ones for my teaching, like what's the difference between innovation and invention. I did a thing of compiling design thinking videos as opposed to books. Mm-hmm. But all of the rest is based on my classroom experiences. And I've just started to teach my graduate class at Teachers College Columbia, and I'm going to start writing about that again.
That's great.
So I'm using my day to day, which is the key. I never realized. So I'm just taking what happened, which I do all the time, because like when I say to people, like, what's the last problem you encountered? You like giving them a context. And so I found my context to write, which is what am I doing during the day, and quickly firing it in. I learned my writing. It's best for me just to start to write. And I just start to write. Yeah. But what truly gave me the confidence was, for years, I was always giving people my work to edit, and it would always come back like completely different. And so I assumed I was a really bad writer. And recently, like a couple of months ago, I gave it to someone to read, and it came back and there were very little changes. And I said, was there a problem? And they said, no, Don, that's your voice. And that's what we want to hear.
Right. You don't want that edited out. I think you had bad editors, maybe.
Yeah. So it was funny. That was when I realized, oh my God, I can do this, and, but people that know me will know this is like miraculous, because I don't have the attention span of an ant. And now I can actually push stuff out, and I'm trying to do it once a week. I have 2 in the pipeline now, but it's been really good fun. And also it's a habit that I've generated. So I designed that habit. And which is another big part of this. I learned I had to design that habit. What was the cue for me to do it? The cue was my classroom teaching, and on from there, what was the response? The response is the writing. And so, it's been, good. I recommend it to anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, it's the thinking that you're doing about, you're processing what happened in the class that day. And then you're, it's your own way to reflect on it. And, we all have to do that. Yeah. There's a comment I wanted to, over in the chat, Kathy Fritz is asking some great comments about, Kathy, do you want to turn on your mic?
Sure.
And just chat?
Yeah. Some people are playing music in the room next to me. So,
okay.
So the thing that, like, I've been working with teachers for about 7 or 8 years in PBL and design thinking integration. And one of the things that I find really difficult is that they really don't want to they've got that process down, and they're still very afraid to allow students to truly guide the design process or truly guide the PBL process. And it's
afraid to let go. Yeah.
And part of it, part of it is fear, because they want to make sure they cover things, but a lot of it is just like, they don't want to share the process. Like, they don't want to share control of the process. And so it's a very different, it's more than just being afraid of handing over the reins. It's like, and I'm not, Doris had mentioned John Hattie's work, which I'll go and definitely check out. But just wondering, like, I've created some tools that have encouraged teachers to give to students, and some teachers have done that, especially in gifted and talented classes with the Grade 'em Set Go tools that I've made. But it's the ones that are teaching kind of in like the typical subject matters that I'm having a harder sell of trying to get them to, especially, So,
and I think part of it is they need to see the benefit of letting go a little bit, but they don't have, especially if they're giving students more options to demonstrate, what product you're going to make or what solution do you want to pursue. And, teachers can feel, I think this is a mistake, but they can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm now managing 20 different projects. No, you're managing one project with maybe 20 different kinds of evidence coming out of it. And so what you want to help students see is that they've got capacity to manage that process and get help when they need it. But when teachers realize, oh my gosh, I can't manage 20 projects. No, you shouldn't. You're managing one project with a lot of student voice. So how are you going to help students kind of set goals, maintain their calendars, be ready to showcase their work when it's time to share their work, and make sure there's some time to practice before they get to that end of. And then I think, what are those tools that might help? I was, sometimes our elementary teachers are better at this than our high school teachers.
Definitely.
And so, maybe they're used to more stations in the classroom, or group work and things like that. So sometimes it's just challenging teachers, like, what might happen if you let go a little bit? And how can you provide students with enough support so they can start to grow their own project management skills? They're going to need those in life, whether it's for this assignment or something that happens, later in life. They're going to need to know how to manage their time, how to work with other people, how to navigate controversies that come up, perhaps in collaborative work. And the more that they can have the ownership of those tools to get through that, it means you're constantly checking in with them, doing fish bowls, demonstrating ways to navigate tensions, those sorts of things. But I think the more teachers see that it gives them more time to focus with students on their learning. Instead of being the one who's managing all the logistics of the project, you're having those great conversations where you can sit down and stay with a student who's saying, I feel stuck, or I feel like I already know this. I want to do something, a little bit harder, or a little more challenging. I want to push myself. You can have those deeper conversations if you get some of the logistical stuff that sometimes teachers want to be totally in charge of because they're good at that. If you can let them let go of a little of that, and then get them to talk about, okay, so how did the nature of your conversations change? What happened? This is where coaches are you in a coaching role? Yeah. This is where coaches are great, because you can sit with teachers and say, what's a question, problem or practice you're having? What do you want to focus on? And then I'll help you with that. And let's try something, and then I'll make some observations, and then we'll touch base and let's see what happens. So if you have a teacher who's all over the management side and, being the only one who can give feedback, that's exhausting. So help them set a goal of, okay, I want to have more peer feedback going on. It doesn't all have to come through me. Well, what does that mean? Kids might need to know how to give each other really great feedback. How could we teach them that? And then at the end, what was the nature of their work when they got feedback from different people? So I think it's just that ongoing process that, they don't want to fail. They don't want the project to fail. They don't want kids to fail. It's a natural human inclination, but you got to let go of those reins a little bit if you want students to learn how to manage their own learning.
And to me, like the thing that you said is like, I think you hit on it without teachers really saying it. It's like, I don't want to manage 20 projects. And I think that's probably what's coming into their head if they start letting students do stuff. And it also just reminds me of like, how, when we're coaching teachers, we give them management skills, but we don't necessarily, we give them some facilitation stuff, but I don't think there's a whole lot of direct training in teachers really learning coaching skills. And it just makes me think about how, it takes years to kind of build, like they have them, but they don't look at them through the lens of like, as a project manager who coaches people along a thread, even though I'm not responsible for like you getting that done necessarily, but I oversee sort of like the check-ins and sort of how do you manage that process. And so it just reminds me of maybe stepping back a little bit and saying, hey, what are teachers who want to go and learn to be like the true, how do you want to learn just a project management skills and being able to coach the projects that students are having, so that you're not going to freak out when this starts happening.
Right. There's another book I wrote called Project-Based Teaching that really looks at the teacher's role in this, and each chapter includes some kind of advice for coaches, instructional coaches, like how can you help teachers through this part of, their own growth? So that might be helpful for you too.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Lucy, look who's joined us.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, it's Lucky.
It's Lucky the dog.
Lucky, why isn't Lucky wearing any clothes? She usually has some her wardrobe.
She's
Hey,
just come out
Lucky.
of bed.
You woke her up to make an appearance.
Yeah, no, she came into the room. Kathy, I think Julie, I'm going to pounce on you. What would your feedback be for Kathy about, because Julie's an amazing 5th grade teacher, guys, that I've worked with. But let's hear her insights.
Yeah.
Thanks, Don. I was just laughing when you said that maybe elementary school teachers feel a little more comfortable with this because I think we're okay with a little bit more chaos and noise in the classroom than middle school and high school teachers maybe are. But yeah, I mean, I think sometimes the allowances that we give to younger kids because we're accepting them developmentally for still being young and help us as elementary school teachers in this process, and middle school and high school teachers possibly feel that instinct for energy and noise is kind of, they've matured out of it, when I don't think middle school and high school kids necessarily have, and they revel in the opportunity for there to be more activity happening in the classroom and a lot of different things happening at different tables, but it's just so unlike what conventional middle school and high school education has been in this country that I think it's a place where we benefit as elementary school teachers when we do project-based learning, because it's still viewed as okay to walk by the classroom door of an elementary school classroom, and in good schools, I hope to hear a lot of energy and activity and kids walking around and everyone standing up and people moving around, and I appreciate that. It's one of the reasons I really revel in the age I work with. I teach 5th grade and have for a long time, and I just think it's a magical year. Like 10 and 11-year-olds are just like, right. They're so open to doing this kind of work, and they're capable in ways, most of them, to really research and write and get into the richness of it, but they're still very, they're still very open to it.
Yeah. No, in my day job, I actually am a professor of design at Texas State. So like, I'm used to like letting my students like, okay, we'll go out and survey stuff and find problems, and then they'll go off and they'll design specific things or develop groups to kind of go off and do that. And I've got some teachers, like you said, some teachers who have come out of like I've K through 5 and into middle school are doing a little bit better. I mean, I mostly have been coaching in Atlanta and in Georgia area and up in the Northeast. But yeah, when you're talking into the high school stuff, it's like the same problems Lucy's been talking about. Either successful schools who are already, they've got a formula, like, or you're dealing with teachers who are there's just so much, especially now with them trying to catch up with what's happened over the last couple of years. It's been a little bit difficult, but a little bit before that, I'm wondering how much more open they might be because of having to have to manage so much chaos in this past year, that there might actually be an opening for that. I think there's an opportunity for teachers to be like, these things are broken.
Yep.
Like, kind of thing.
Yeah,
So,
it's like the whole system has just kind of been smashed. And so let's think in different ways. Yeah, I mean, the piece at the beginning when we were talking about learning leaps just was something I needed to hear, because, as an educator, and I know everyone feels this way, you watch the news and hear so much negative talk about, this is seemingly nothing that educators have been doing the past 2 years, and that it's all been missed opportunity. And I think that's so not true. And there's so many things that kids are learning, life skills through all of this, that it's important to keep telling ourselves that.
Yeah, we did a big shift to these mini PBLs, where I sort of had I devised this sort of a smaller sort of like they're more like design, what I would call design sprint. So much more design sprint based. And so they were just doing these like small iterative loops of stuff as little one-offs, just to kind of make it easier to manage. And
Mhm.
sometimes I think that faster paced, low stakes stuff actually can accumulate, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you get everyone building stamina, like
Yeah.
seeing through the process in a littler way and seeing how it works sometimes I think can definitely help.
Yeah,
I think we need to design PD that way. I mean, I think PD needs an overhaul going post-COVID or whatever we call it, the next period coming up, because people's time is valuable, and I don't think anybody's going to tolerate being sitting in and being talked at all the time. And so, I also think the adults in the buildings are really looking for connections. They're looking to be with their colleagues and hear their stories. They want to go see what's going on in their teachers' classrooms. It doesn't have to be anything super fancy or deep. Even doing an ed camp for half a day type of thing where teachers are presenting each other is much more powerful than, something. And so I really want to see schools kind of start thinking about, this using the summer or back to school time for regrouping and reframing, as Don has been saying. And he and I have been talking about a couple different things. I don't know if Bill is still here. I don't think Bill is still here, but there's a researcher that he's brought up that talks about elements of motivation. I can find the article and put it in the chat. And one of the 4 things is autonomy, I believe. And then Don was talking about the Human Element book, and I had my notes, I scribbled on it the other day. And because we've been talking about how do you get people involved in our PLC, and you were talking about inertia, effort,
emotion, and reactance.
Yeah, taking away things. And again, it goes back to this autonomy, like the principles of adult learning, but like more than that. And I think I don't know why in this day and age we're still not cognizant of that kind of thing, and being thoughtful about how we're handling and working with teachers. I just think it's an interesting conundrum that if we want teachers to really keep going, we have to really focus on that.
Okay, I'm going to have to jump off.
I think it's time.
Yeah, it's just been wonderful talking with you all. I've been so appreciative of the invitation and the fact that you started this community. I think we all need these sorts of connections. They're so important.
Thank you so much, Suzie, for coming. We really appreciate you sharing your time.
My pleasure. What a treat.
And I think this is definitely a guide for the kind of work that we've been talking about right now about regrouping. Like, this is the perfect tool for kind of facilitating that. So I hope more schools will take you up on your services and your work and that sort of thing. And I'm going to be reading it more in depth. And thank you for everything, Suzie. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful.
Thanks,
Reach out
Suzie.
anytime on the writing
Again.
side. I'm always happy to be an ear.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
I'm going to stop recording
Thanks,
right
Suzie.
now. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody, for
And
coming.
thanks,
I
Don, for the
appreciate it.
questions. Love it.
Okay.
Good to see you all. Take care.
Great conversation.
Bye.
Bye.